Well, I keep trying. I'll go ahead. You can just manually add me into the meeting. So for the roll call. First order on the agenda is to approve the prior committee meeting minutes. Can I have a motion and a second?
Rod Frierson, so move.
Rise and moves. Floyd seconds. All right. Call the question. Could everyone vote, please? I think we need to reset. We do have a quorum. Just a minute. Okay, do we need to clear the screen and start again? Technology is wonderful except when it doesn't work. So. Okay, let's everybody, well, check in again. Roll call. I must have somebody else's device, so just add me as present, and let's move on to the agenda. We need to vote for the prior meeting minutes. If you can clear the screen and reset it. Okay. Voting. Locked. Clearing out. I just let's everybody raise a hand. I see 6 members here. All in favor of the minutes, raise your hand, please. Any abstentions? Okay. I'm sure the motion was approved. The next item on the agenda is we will have a report from a resolution from Don Williams authorizing the bus, rail, and mobility service standards.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mr. Parker, members of the committee. This is an update and a resolution to adopt the FY22 service standards. As many of you may know already, that the MARTA Act requires that not less than 120 days after the adoption of the board budget, then we come back and also adopt the service standards for the fiscal year. And so what I want to do today is just briefly give you an overview of the proposed changes and then ask for your approval to move the resolution to the full board for adoption. Next slide. Just quickly in terms of some of the background, I know we have some new members here, but the purpose of the service standards are to achieve the outline goals here, certainly establish a process for evaluating our service, and then also we want to make sure that it's equitable and fiscally responsible in terms of how we modify and use the service. And then certainly we have the state as well as the federal guidelines that we must adhere to in terms of the service modification and service standards. Next slide. Just quickly, in terms of some of the guiding principles that we've established as part of this, certainly we want to maximize ridership, improve the quality of the service and the effectiveness of the service. And then certainly we know that we have to have equitable service, and we want to make sure that the system provides good connectivity, minimize the impact to our ADA community, and then certainly we want to properly manage the transit resources, and above all, we want to have a safe and secure transit system. Next slide. So in terms of the MARTA Act and some of the things that we have to look at is, anytime we do our service modification, we are required to do public hearings. And these outline the different trigger points in terms of that requirement being in place. Certainly when we do a fare change, any major route alteration, any implementation of new service, any service modification that results in a 25% daily change in daily number of trips, and then certainly if we were to discontinue the service, we need to go out to the public and let them know about that. Next slide. This is going to just be a quick summary. Next slide, please. We did not do any major changes for this time around. We just did some really good scrubbing of the document, looked at some of the streamlining, some of the language, removed some of the repetitiveness of what was in the document itself, and we wanted to make it an easier read for the audience in terms of the service standards. Next slide. Some of the things that we did do is certainly when we start looking at the data in the service standards, we want to update that to make sure that the facts and figures were correct, and then certainly come back and look at how we provide the service and make sure that was correct in what we're doing today. And then there was one section in there we call the weather event section. That's for, if we had some type of major weather event, how we would operate emergency service. What we've done with that section is actually expanded it, made it more of an emergency event section where we can take into account such things as the COVID-19 and then potentially a food shortage if that happens in the future. And so those are some of the things that we did in terms of updating the documents. The next slide. And so that is a quick overview of what we did for the FY22 service standards. What we're asking the committee to do is to approve the resolution so we can move it to the board and be adopted in September. And with that, I'll take any questions that the committee may have.
I have a motion. I need a second.
Second by Rod Frierson.
Okay. All right, we have a first and second. All right, any questions for Mr. Williams? Any discussion?
Chair, I have a question. I was wondering, is there any language in here that covers just kind of what we went through with this COVID situation and the fact that we could not meet publicly to let the public know the changes that were occurring, or is that done someplace else?
In this document, what we've done is had a section that says, okay, if case of an emergency event, and we would look at the COVID-19 as an emergency event, here's the things that we need to do. And then we also have different documents that we have, because we have a inclement weather plan that we're looking at. We have a fuel shortage plan that we're looking at. All these plans would be triggered as part of those events. And so what this document does is just reference what we're going to be doing as part of putting the service out there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Quick,
Bill?
the bus system evaluation that's going on, when are we scheduled to, I mean, I haven't heard much about that lately, but I'm just curious as to when that might be, when we might hear more about that.
You know, one of the things that we've done recently is slowed it down a little bit to get through COVID-19, reestablish the service. So we will be re-engaging the consultant in early fall. And I'm not sure, Heather, when the next sort of public process might be.
It looks like we're going to go to our stakeholders next, and then we would go public. So the stakeholder meetings, we're requesting to schedule those starting in September. Stakeholders, in this case, are folks like Emory, which operates transit service, Cobb, our Gwinnett, and some of the CIDs. So we're going to them in September, and then we'll follow up from that with the public.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Williams? If not, I'll call the question. Could we vote, please? Okay, the motion's approved. I'm voting for Mr. Dewart, but we'll keep it straight up here on the right, so. All right, thank you, Don.
All right.
The next item is a briefing for Architectural Engineering Consulting Services by Larry Prescott. Larry?
Morning, Chairman Pond, committee members, Mr. Parker. It's good to see you all again in person. Today, the briefing is for the Infrastructure, Architectural, and Engineering Consultant Services program. Next slide. Currently, we have 4 on-call contracts that are expiring next year between June and September. The operations and maintenance, communication systems, electrical, architectural, and landscape. So no, you're not having deja vu. I was here before you virtually back in May asking for the O&M one solicitation, but with the arrival of our new chief, Mr. Renew, we've had the opportunity to review our program and better fit the vision for the capital program going forward. Next slide. So what we want to do is combine these 4 contracts into one. So stepping back just a little bit, the top half here where the green highlight is the system engineering on-call contract that I will be coming before you next month with the selection approval for that on-call contract. Now that covers the systems wayside side of the house. So the lower half, the light blue highlights, is the infrastructure side of the house. And the stair steps you see there in the blue is what was proposed going forward for those 4 individual contracts. The bottom is where we want to consolidate that down into one overall contract. Now the current utilization for those 4 contracts is just over $28 million currently. So that bottom consolidation with one solicitation will not only save time with the solicitation process, including your time, but also down the road will save overtime costs and overhead costs associated with managing 4 separate contracts down in one over the whole 5-year program. Next slide. Essentially, the scope stays the same. We're just consolidating all 4 of these down into one consolidated contract, so overall help us out. This combined multi-discipline contract will allow us to engage full contracts, so to speak, as they come out of the planning process, which now goes up to 30%. We can pick those up and run with them with one contract rather than piecemealing it with the current program we have with multiple contracts or sending it outside of our group here. Next slide. So the proposal for this procurement will happen, or solicitation, sorry, will happen in this fiscal year. So I'll plan to be back to you back in the spring for the selection process. We'll follow the basic program, 5 years with a 3-year base and 2 one-year options. We're estimating $6 million a year for a total of $30 million over that 5-year program. Our goal is to select a minimum of 2 consultants, similar to what we're doing for the systems contract, with the possibility of a third medium-size firm to allow us to engage a little bit more subject matter expert availability in the community to address the size projects that we have, the small to the medium to the large. Of course, these projects will be funded out of the capital improvement program each year. And based on the current usage in our contracts now with the diversity in our subs going forward and what we're projecting to use, we're assuming that the DBE percentages will be in the 30% range once again. Next slide. And with that, I thank you for your time and open up for any questions you may have.
Okay. This is not a board action, but now's the time to ask Larry for any questions or comments you may have.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So you said that you're gonna reduce your contracts from multiple consulting companies down to one. So how does that improve the process? I mean, I would thought that might create less competitiveness in the consulting services.
Similarly to what we did for the systems contract, what we'll do is it'll still be the same disciplines and the same scope needed and the same $30 million compared to the $28 million we have now. What we'll do is break it down into 2, possibly 3 individual, it's one contract, but 3 individual consultants for this contract.
Okay.
And so that'll allow us to utilize those 3 with their sub-consultants that are being utilized currently now, or possibility of those, and that same diversity will still be in place.
Okay, so with the consolidation, what I'm hearing is that you'll be able to move this process through a lot faster.
Yes, sir.
A lot more effectively.
Yes, sir.
But the cost of it will still remain the same, or maybe go down. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Correct.
All right, thank you.
Chair, so in terms of, and I guess it's kind of piggybacks off of what he was saying in regards to consolidating. So when you're going from 4 down to, is that better?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
I can hear you.
Okay, when you're going from 4 to 1, as far as capacity is concerned, like, I mean, right now, across the board, especially engineering and architecture, we have a shortage of staff. And so will that be impacted, like the capacity of these firms to actually get the work done?
Actually, it will help because of our processes will be reduced down by 1/4 of what we're doing now, processing those contracts internally. If you look at what we currently have with the teams that we have on those 4 now, there's a lot of duplication. Not only the primes, but the subs. And some of them are reversed, so to speak. So as far as the consultants go, it's the same pool, and we're trying to expand that more nationally by consolidating, if that makes any sense. We're consolidating the process, but not the scope.
Okay.
And so by having it down to 2 primes, maybe 3 primes, we'll still have the same availability because of the scale will still be the same.
Okay, and then, so with the selection of those consultants, when there's actually a project that's being bid, are they competing?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll do a comparison.
Okay.
So when we do it internally, we can do a comparison, not only cost, because cost is really our focus, but we were going to focus on availability of the subject matter experts. Because we're having trouble internally with our own staff in specified areas. That's why we have this contract to begin with. By having that availability of comparing who's available at one time. So if we need a specialized corrosion control expert, there's only a few of those in the country. So if we can go between those 2 or 3 consultants and see which one has the best availability. And so that'll be our primary focus, what they can do, when they can do, and quality, of course, is always built into that. But then cost is always a secondary consideration.
Gotcha. And then regarding the diversity piece, so I saw like under the selection criteria, where it breaks down the percentages, that for the diversity piece that it's pass fail, why is that as opposed to having to meet like the 30% that you spoke to?
I think that's more based on the DBE portion of it is more of the, I guess, authorization that they are actually DBE consultants. There's a lot of confusion these days about what an SME is, a DBE, and whether they're GDOT approved or if they're DBE somewhere else. Because we've had a lot of that lately with the international or national type contracts that we've had, that they may be DBE in Chicago, but they haven't done the process here. So the pass-fail is kind of screening out those people, letting them know they need to be DBE approved locally in Georgia, not just nationally.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
All right?
Okay. I think Mr. Parker wanted to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pond. I did want to add, this is obviously what Larry has presented is an on-call contract. And one of the things that we will consider is for specific, more complex, longer in duration projects, we would want to go and hire a specific firm to do that. An example of that was we did go through a process and hired a consultant to do our AFC project. We could have used one of our on-call contracts, but we wanted to go through a separate process and select the best qualified firm for that. So, you know, from time to time, we would be coming to you with authorization around the advertisement or the procurement of a specific activity. Like I would fully expect that one of our corridor projects, we would probably want to hire a consultant to do, like we did on Summerhill. We hired a consultant to do the final design of Summerhill. So this won't be the only mechanism, but it will be the mechanism that we use for more routine work.
Thank you for that.
Okay. And Larry, just to clarify, before we had 4 contracts, each one of those had separate criteria, separate
Correct.
contract lanes to stay in. In this case, you will end up with 3 contracts, but those contracts will be broad-based, so you'll have 3 firms that could be considered for each task order,
Yes, sir.
and you could pick the firm that's best suited for that task order.
Agreed. Yes.
The other comment I have is you said you potentially would add a middle-sized firm. I think it's particularly important. This contract is pretty broad-based, but the smaller firms, particularly locally, cannot compete against the global firms on qualifications. So I think it's very important that you have a classification there, whether you call it middle, small, or whatever, but give an opportunity for the smaller firms to compete for this type of work. So.
Yes, sir. We'll be working with legal on the new process that they're putting together, the standardization of the contracts, to be able to put language in that would help us to do that.
Okay?
Mr. Pond?
Yes.
Question.
Go ahead, Ms. Scott.
Thank you. You mentioned to make sure that whatever firm would be contracted was also certified DBE in the state of Georgia. Will you also be looking at legislation, for instance, that gives companies tax credits based upon doing business with firms in Georgia?
That's going to be again, looking at our contractual requirements, we'll have to work with the legal department on how those standardized contracts are going to address those.
One of the things that we have to make sure that we do is adhere to the FTA's processes, and I don't believe that the FTA allows us to give any geographical preferences in their program. So it would be likely that we wouldn't be able to do anything specifically like that.
But we'll make sure.
Yeah, but although as we give task orders, you know, we always want to balance between subject matter experts who have some superior knowledge about a project, but the bulk of the work, even with a national firm, is done locally here. Yes. with the large staffs that they have, and you know, encouraging work to be done here locally is something that we do. I would guess the vast majority of the work of all these contracts are done by residents of the state of Georgia.
Agreed.
Any other questions for Mr. Prescott? Thank you, Larry.
Thanks again.
Are there any other matters for this committee? Not, we'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay, thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the July 29th, 2021 Operation and Safety Minutes, Operations and Safety Committee minutes. They were delivered to you by email and are in your board packet. May I hear the motion for approval?
I move for approval.
Is there a second?
A second, Rod Frierson.
Please vote. All right, the next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for professional services for homeless outreach, LOA L47029. We'll turn it over to Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris, good to see you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. Again, my name is Lyle Harris. I'm the Senior Director of Customer and Employee Experience. I'm here to tell you about a program that really is doing great work here at MARTA, and I hope that you'll enjoy this presentation. Next slide. I want to talk to you about a program we call MARTA Hope. I want to give you some background about the program, tell you about the goals and the makeup of the team behind it, as well as the successes and challenges that we faced, and most importantly, I want to talk about what our next steps are for this MARTA Hope program. Next slide, please. The MARTA Hope program, as you may or may not know, started as a result of high-level discussions that were taking place between MARTA's leadership and members of the homeless outreach community here in Metro Atlanta. So we're celebrating the actual launch of the program in August of 2021. We just had our anniversary. And what it was is we started working with an outreach organization called Hope Atlanta. Hope Atlanta is one of the oldest and most successful and credible outreach organizations in the city and, in fact, the state of Georgia. So as part of this pilot program we started with them, we wanted to conduct direct outreach on our transit system to people who were taking refuge and seeking haven on MARTA. We wanted to have 100 direct engagements every month, and that meant that we'd just go out and talk to people and see if they were willing to accept some of the services that we had to offer. And out of those 100 engagements, we were looking to house at least 50 people in permanent housing by the end of the first year of the program. I'll talk to you a little bit about that later on in the presentation. We started out very modestly with a budget of $122,000, and we added another $30,000 that enabled us to do a small but important and significant expansion of the program. Next slide, please. Most people don't know that MARTA Hope is actually an acronym, and we all know what MARTA stands for, but HOPE stands for Homeless Outreach and Proactive Engagement, which means that we were going to go directly to folks who needed help, who needed our services, and see if we could find them the connections that and the resources that they needed. This was an issue because homelessness has been around forever. It's an issue especially in Metro Atlanta and other large metropolitan areas where there is a shortage of affordable housing as well as a dearth of services that are provided that are available to people who need them. And on transit, this is something that's going on here at MARTA, obviously, but at transit systems all around the country and, in fact, all around the world. As people are seeking refuge, seeking safe haven, they come to a transit system because they know that these are relatively safe places where they can find comfort and security. But also it raises problems and concerns for our other riders who are concerned about their own personal safety and security on the system. So we had an obligation, again, to take some steps and take proactive action to address these concerns from our riders. Next slide. So I want to tell you a little bit about the primary goals of the program and the team behind the program as well. Next slide, please. So we had 4 primary goals. The first and foremost was to improve the overall transit experience for our riders, especially now as we're trying to attract riders to come back to the system after the COVID-19 pandemic. We wanted to make sure that they felt safe and secure when they're on the system. Secondly, we want to provide an effective and humane, holistic approach to addressing homelessness, as opposed to just treating it as a law enforcement issue. We don't believe that homelessness is a crime, and we weren't going to just start rousting people off the system. We wanted to see if we could provide them with some direct assistance. And that was the third goal, to provide that direct assistance by connecting them to the resources outside of MARTA that they might need. And fourth, and this is a really important one, we wanted to continue to collaborate with the stakeholders regionally and across our jurisdictions that would help us to make homelessness a rare, brief, and non-recurring experience for people who are going through it. Next slide. This is my favorite slide. I want to talk to you about the MARTA Hope team. The MARTA Hope team is comprised of 3 social caseworkers who work for or contracted through Hope Atlanta, who are paired up with the uniformed protective specialists that work under the auspices of the MARTA Police Department. Working in pairs of 3 case managers who you see pictured on the slide. They go out across the system every day from, just during the weekdays actually, from about 6 a.m. in the morning to 11 p.m. at night. And they go out and talk to as many people as possible who appear to be unsheltered and offer them help. I just want to, for a moment, call out the names of these 3 case managers. They're very dedicated people, and they're doing amazing work. They're Gloria Woodard, Vincent Allen, and Timothy Robinson. And again, they not only bring the credibility to the work that they do, but also they have lived experience. They've been through homelessness. They've been through drug and substance abuse, so they know whereof they speak, and they bring a special talent for this work. The field protective specialists are uniformed again. They don't carry firearms, but they're trained in certain tactics to make sure that situations don't devolve if they're encountering someone who may be unwilling to accept help and have some other issues. They don't carry firearms again, but they are in direct contact with the MARTA Police Department at all time through their radios. Next slide, please. So I want to talk to you about, obviously, the successes and some of the challenges that we've been going through as a result of this program. Next slide. In the course of a year, we've been able to do more than 2,000 engagements. That means, again, that we've gone out and spoken to people on our system and asked them if they needed help. So we've done about 2,100 of those. We've been able to place 224 people into shelters, usually emergency shelter, because they were seeking refuge from the cold or from the elements. This doesn't seem like a big number, but it's really important. We've been able to reunify about 25 people with their families and put them on a more stable path. We've been able to connect people to resources and services such as the Social Security Administration and food stamp programs, so we've been able to connect 360 people to those services. Through an informal partnership with another organization called Georgia Works, we've been able to put 42 people in full-time jobs, so we're very proud of that. Also helped 54 veterans, and through a program called Coordinated Entry, which is a systematic approach to helping people find not only shelter but other services, we've been able to put 16 people in that program as well. Next slide. Yes, we've had some significant challenges. We found this to be true with other programs like this at other transit systems, but more than 60% of the people that we try to encounter and ask if they need help tell us flatly, no, they don't want our help. So that's become an ongoing challenge for us. Out of the 50 people we hope to house in the first year of the program, we've only been able to help 5 find permanent housing. And we also have an ongoing issue with finding beds for single women who are experiencing homelessness. There are just not a lot of resources out there, so we're working with our other partners and stakeholders to find some dedicated resources when we need them. Next slide, please. This is very difficult, discouraging, and often frustrating work, but our MARTA Hope team, like I said, very dedicated, very passionate to the work that they're doing. They actually, every week, send me a collection of small stories of victories, of successes that they've had in the encounters that they've been on the system. And we've collected these into something we call the Chronicles of Hope, and we review these, and we're actually looking to We've also been doing some social media outreach, and we find that our customers are getting a very positive reaction to the work we're doing through the MARTA Hope program, so we'll be doing even more of that in the months ahead. Next slide. This is a special little highlight that we just celebrated a few weeks ago. Through the Artbound program, we were able to get a small grant through the Smart Growth of America organization, as well as the Kresge Foundation. And we were able to hire a local artist who's also a social worker. And what he did with this, he followed the MARTA Hope teams around and encountered some of the folks that you see. He took pictures of them and then turned them into these amazing, powerful portraits that we have on display right now at 5 Points. We had an opening that Mr. Parker and several others attended, and it went very well and helped to put a human face on this issue that we're addressing right now. Next slide. Want to talk to you about where we're going from here with this program. Next slide. So it's hot and muggy outside still, but we know that's not going to last forever, and the winter is coming and will soon be upon us. And we know that there's probably going to be more requests for emergency shelter, so we're just trying to gird our loins and be ready for that when it comes. We've been in contact with all our jurisdictional partners, including the City of Atlanta, DeKalb County, and Fulton County, to talk to them about some of the steps that they're going to be taking in the months ahead as they get ready for the winter months. In City of Atlanta, they're going to be having warming centers as they often do, as they normally do. They won't have any new shelter beds, but those warming centers will be open once the temperatures dip below 32 degrees, below freezing. DeKalb County is going to be opening its winter weather shelters as well, and they're looking to assign a specific person who will be dedicated to working with the MARTA Hope case managers to help the clients that they encounter on our system. And Fulton County is also going to be providing buses to provide transportation to people who need to get back and forth between shelters. And they're also starting to work on their wintertime plans as well. And we're looking to ask MARTA to appoint someone to sit on the Continuum of Care Community Board. And these community boards are the entities that work with the local jurisdictions to provide insight and guidance on how they direct their homeless outreach programs. Next slide. So here's what we'd like to do with the program going forward. We're recommending that we expand the program from 3 currently MARTA Hope teams to 6. That means we'd add 3 more case managers and 3 more field protective specialists as the need arises. And we're looking to increase the number of people that we encounter every month from 100 right now to 170 to expand the program. We're seeking $2,880,000 to also expand the program for the next year so that we can do more of the work that we need to do. We're looking to expand weekend coverage right now. I think I mentioned that we're only doing weekday coverage. We'd like to expand that to the weekend as well. We'd like to have more shifts for more MARTA Hope caseworkers, so that we're not just covering one line at a time. We'll be able to cover multiple lines during every shift. We also wanted to expand our coverage to outreach at bus shelters and streetcar shelters as well. We want to look for dedicated shelters for women who need it. We want to collaborate with the other stakeholders and do more work in terms of identifying the homeless population on MARTA's system. And we also want to develop an annual report that we can come back to you a year from now and tell you that we made even more successes than we have so far. We created some brochures that everyone should have in their packets or on their desks, and we hope that you take a moment to look at those. Next slide. So this is just some of the contact information that you'll find in those brochures. We have established a point of contact and office downtown at the 5-point station. We've had 2 dedicated phone numbers for people to call if they see someone who may be unsheltered, or if they're in fact unsheltered themselves and need some direct assistance. They can call one of those 2 numbers. We have a dedicated MARTA email address as well, and we also have a presence on the itsmarta.com website. And these on the right-hand side, you'll just see our partners from home, obviously, from the City of Atlanta, Hope Atlanta, our direct partner, the Regional Commission on Homelessness, and the Gateway Center Shelter in downtown Atlanta. Next slide, please. I've been doing a lot of talking, but now I want to show you exactly what the workers were doing. This is a video that was produced by our very own Adam Shoemaker that talks about the work that one of our case managers does, and I'd just like you to watch and take a listen to the work, what she has to say.
Hi, I'm Gloria Woodard. I'm a MARTA Hope case manager. I ride the buses, I ride the trains, I ride the streetcar, looking for unsheltered individuals that are in need of social services. No one wants to pay their money for a service that's not company and utilizing their service. So MARTA Hope is coming in to help with their situation, making a better situation and making a win-win for everyone, to help them get in a better place, but also to assure the people that are paying for the service that it's okay, you're going to get where you're going and you're going safely. Hope Atlanta is a non-profit organization. We refer individuals out to other agencies to receive the services that they need. We provide them with food. We do have clothing. We do have shoes. We have warming kits. We have hygiene kits. We also connect people with programs as far as substance abuse, as far as mental health, housing. We have great field protection specialists that go out with us, and they assist too with our calls and an engagement started, and the next thing you know, a social service has been provided. The reason why I'm very passionate about my job is because I've been homeless before, so I can self-identify with the people that I interact with, to let use to help someone today. To help someone not sleep on the train anymore. And to let them know you're not alone. You see some of the same people over and over. And in my head, you're saying, why won't you allow me to help them? Because remember, they have that right. They have the right of saying no. But when they tell you yes, when they tell you yes, you want to be able to be that help right then and right there. I have clients that come back to me. I got one right now, since I met him on the train, got him into a rehab center, and now he's working on getting his own housing. He's a totally different individual now. He said, I am so glad you woke me up on that train. We know that we're making a difference because our clients tell us, I'm gorgeous Gloria, and I'm a MARTA Hope hero, here to help you on purpose.
Thank you. And with that, given the profound obligations to assure a safe and secure transit environment for our customers and to offer a humane and much-needed approach and outreach to people who are experiencing homelessness, I respectfully request your approval of this resolution. Thank you, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Mr. Harris, thank you so much. It goes without saying that that truly is profound work that you guys are doing. I know Mr. Parker has a comment.
Yeah, I just want to, thank Lyle and Rhonda. Your energy around this important program is paying dividends to so many people. But I think that this really works for three reasons. One is because leaders like Rhonda and Lyle have organized us around this. Two, we have a strong partner with Hope Atlanta. They're professional. They understand how to perform outreach in a way that MARTA doesn't understand it. With professional social workers and people who have just a real compassion and energy around helping people. And then the third thing, I really want to recognize the fellow who's sitting back there in the corner, our chief of police. If the MARTA Police Department didn't want to view this in the way they're viewing it, it just wouldn't work. The partnership has got to be between the social worker and our protective specialist, and that's what I think makes this special. Had a great conversation with Jeff Smith at our event that we had a few weeks ago, and that's exactly what he said to me. He says the reason this works is because of the true partnership between social workers and our protective specialists who really want to make sure that we're serving people. So thanks to everyone who does this. And I think that the ask that Lyle has brought forward to the board in terms of financial is inconsequential to what we do, but so consequential to the people who ride our system and need help.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Thank you, Mr. Worthy. I appreciate that, and that's absolutely true.
Any other questions from members of the board? Chair Scott.
Yes, sir, I have a comment.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Blakely?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Harris.
So, Ms. Blakely, how are you?
Great, thank you. Two comments/questions. Thank you guys, number one, for what you do. Actually, my lock screen is a picture of a homeless person at a bus shelter that I've had on my phone for years. This is a reminder of why I'm doing what I do. But question number one, in regards to increasing the housing, permanent housing, is there anything else that we can do to help increase that number, to help improve that number?
I don't know if there's anything that we can do, but obviously, like I said, we've stayed in contact with the Gateway Center, with Regional Commission on Homelessness, which coordinates all the homeless outreach efforts across the metropolitan area. But I don't know that there's anything personally or institutionally that MARTA could be doing to increase the amount of housing. I think Partners from Home is going to be reaching out to Jacob Vallow in our TOD department to see if there's some opportunities there to increase affordable housing as part of our stock through a TOD program. But I'm not sure that there's anything institutionally that we can commit to. I think Mr. Parker has something to say.
Well, but maybe there's nothing we can do to directly change some real difficult situations that we face in this region, and it's disheartening to know that we have literally no beds reserved for single women who need housing. But I think that what this program has done is it's brought an awareness to many people, including myself and members, people who sit around this horseshoe. And it positions ourselves to be advocates when we're talking to, the elected officials that we serve about this real issue. And sometimes, I'll be honest, pushing back on, we've had, I don't want to get into details of this, but Lyle's been part of conversations where, we've heard there's enough resources to house people. And, my personal conclusion is there just isn't right now. So I think this will help us, in an indirect way, advocating for the people who need help and exposing, the difficulties that people have around this region.
I agree. And then the second part of my question is, with the amount of people who won't accept the help, is that maybe because the police are there? Like, is there police intimidation? And I'm absolutely in total support of having the police there, because I totally understand there's a security element there as well. But I'm just wondering if, I don't know, is that a part of, the rejection of help?
The fact that police are not,
That the police are there, because I know, like, in some instances, when I worked downtown, I rode the train, there were a lot of homeless people on there, and so anytime that there was a police officer that just happened to stroll, down the train, you could feel the tension. And even though, in this case, in all cases, the police is here to help and assist, is there a rejection from the person that's, that you're trying to help? Is it because, is there a police intimidation type factor there? And not that it's intentional, but I'm just wondering.
I don't think that's the case, and I think that, again, to echo the point that Mr. Parker made, the MARTA Police Department and Chief Crayer and his team have done an amazing job of finding the right people. One of the things that we have to make sure to do, and is at the forefront of everything that we're doing here, is we have to make sure that everyone is safe and secure. We definitely took the approach that we didn't want to have an armed, uniformed officer there, but we did want to have a presence to represent and to be able to connect to the MARTA Police Department in case that need arose. But I don't think that has been the case. The field protective specialists that have been assigned to this detail over the year that we've been in operation have done an extraordinary job of playing the background, stepping forward if and when they needed to. They're very well trained, and I think we've had a great partnership, but I don't think that's been a problem. Again, we've talked to other transit systems have said that they face similar issues, and the rejection rate is pretty consistent with what those other transit systems who are trying these kinds of approaches have found as well.
And Mr. Harris, and maybe this is a question for the chief, just for the benefit of all of us, can y'all describe the difference between an armed police officer, a post-sworn officer, and a field protective specialist?
Good morning, Chief Crayer. Hope everybody's doing well. So that's a great question. The leadership under Mr. Parker about a year and a half ago started looking around the country, and we started seeing that there's a balance between law enforcement, police with a gun and a badge, and a protective specialist type scenario where you have the public seeing there's eyes and ears out there that are keeping an eye on my protection, my safety, but there's not this underlying worry of, oh, it's a police officer, a lot of tension. So we started to integrate these, what we call field protective specialists. And if you've seen them, they're in the blue uniforms. They carry a radio. They carry some other equipment on their belt, but they're not armed police officers. They don't have arrest powers. So they're basically our eyes and ears of the system. And what we did was we matched them with the HOPE team, and they've done a fantastic job. They're there just to make sure that everybody involved is safe and secure in the transition or in the discussions. And if police are needed, they can call them pretty quickly. So they are, I think, to Lyle's point, they're a calming effect in a lot of instances. I don't think they have a negative effect on whether or not somebody accepts services or not.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have a comment. First of all, to say thank you for your service. It's a great program.
Yes,
I did have a question about the 63% of the folks who say won't get the service as well. I was curious if you have a mechanism or a process in place where you track them. Do you keep up with who these people are? And Is there a way to sort of do
I don't think
follow-up?
we do. It's really an individual preference, whether they want to even have a conversation with you. And, you know, to be transparent, mental health issues are a big factor in that. We train our people with CIT, crisis intervention training, to try to get them to open up and to accept the services. But at the end of the day, like Mr. Parker said, I think our elected officials in the cities that we serve have to continue to strive to work on not just shelter, but mental health issues, substance abuse issues. There's just not a whole lot of resources out there, even if somebody raises their hand and said, yeah, I need help. It's difficult.
Yeah, let me add, I think that's, you know, one thing in the conversation I had with Jeff Smith from Hope Atlanta was that many times the people who are saying no already know what services are available to them. They've been homeless for a long period of time, they're unhoused, and, you know, they may need help, but they clearly believe and have experienced that the right help isn't out there for them. So, you know, another tap on the shoulder isn't going to, unfortunately, change their lives.
I have a question for Mr. Harris, and I kind of want to talk about the impact of COVID. You know, this virus knows no bounds. It doesn't see color, it doesn't see homelessness, it doesn't see wealth, it knows no bounds. Has the COVID impact on public transportation, which we've all been dealing with since March, whereby generally people don't want to be in a confined space with a lot of people like a train car during this virus, have we seen homelessness decline? Have we seen, we know we haven't seen homelessness decline, but have we seen homeless riders on the train decline? And if we have, do we think the weather turning cold will make that shoot back up?
I'm not sure if we've seen an actual decline in the number of people. And again, this is obviously to the previous question. This is a hard issue to track because if someone tells you no, we can't force them or, you know, insist that they take the help. When they get on the system, when they accept help, there's something called HMIS that enables us to keep track of them so that we can do better reporting, and that's reported to local jurisdictions as well as the federal government. But whether or not we're seeing an actual decline, it's also hard to track. One of the things we're looking to do is to have a baseline survey through the point in time count that takes place once every year. We'll be very involved in that again this time around. So we'll be able to get a baseline to see where we are and figure out where we're going and what the trend lines are. But right now, I can't say with any certainty about whether or not that. But certainly, as the winter time approaches, we expect to see a lot more people who are seeking services and coming to the transit system for Haven. So we're just trying to be prepared for that as well.
Chair Scott?
Yes, my question is in regards to the veterans that you're helping. Is there someone at the Veterans Administration that you're able to deal directly with that would block any roadblocks you may have in attempting to help veterans?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would love if you have some contacts or connections. That would be very helpful. I can share that with the folks from Hope Atlanta.
I do.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
I'd be glad to share.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, not particularly for this presentation, but for what you do. And I mean, the people that go out in the field and talk to these guys they're real heroes, in my opinion. I'm not capable of doing that. And I can tell you, when you sit down with somebody homeless on the train and you ask them, knowing that 60% of the time they're going to tell you, no, get out of my face, it takes a rare person with a tremendous amount of courage to be willing to do that and face that battle. Unfortunately for you all, yesterday I sat in on a briefing from DeKalb County and what they do for homeless people. And it amazed me that DeKalb's budget is $6, $8, $10 million for dealing with homeless, none of which comes from the DeKalb County taxpayer directly. It comes from HUD or several other avenues. And that money is readily available to them, and they are, and I'm not putting words in their mouths about having too much money, but they are a source of revenue that I think MARTA certainly should have access to. If you need funds for something, ask the DeKalb County for some help along these lines. I'm encouraging you to do that because I know they're willing to help. And I think that this continuum of care board that is, and all this I learned yesterday, quite honestly, is necessary if you're going to get HUD funding. Well, it's like an 11, 15-member board. Does MARTA have a seat on the DeKalb County board?
Not that I'm aware of, but as I mentioned.
Well, I'm absolutely certain they would love and welcome you to be a part of that. The presentation yesterday was to the 12 cities in DeKalb County and what they might be able to do. Well, there's a tremendous amount of funding, of money out there right now that the cities have gotten, millions of dollars. The cities are looking for a way that they might be able to spend some of that money to help deal with this issue. So I'm encouraging you to make this presentation to the 12 cities in DeKalb County and any other cities around that might be willing to do that, because I think that's a tremendous possibility for money to deal with this. And I know that money's not going to solve this problem in entirety, but it's certainly going to help. And one of the issues you mentioned just a little bit here, which came up yesterday, was this bricks and mortar. There's no bricks and mortar place in DeKalb County for this. And I understand, believe me, having been a mayor for a long time, if you bring up putting one of these, where you're going to put it is the big problem. Nobody wants this thing in their neighborhood. They don't want it around them. They don't want it part of them. So I understand but finding a place to put these people or to help these people is one of the tremendous things that, and MARTA, I'm delighted that you're doing this, and I'm just beginning to become more aware of this situation, but MARTA needs to participate with Fulton County, the city of Atlanta, DeKalb County, Clayton County. They need to participate with all of those people and in figuring out what's going on in some sort of continuing portions. And the cities, I think, the smaller cities, Lithonia, Pine Lake, cities with 1,000 people can help with some of this stuff. So one of the issues that we brought up in DeKalb was that while DeKalb does a good job, most of those people that deal there in DeKalb work from 8 to 5. Well, most of the problems that we deal with in homelessness don't happen between 8 and 5. They happen in the afternoon, at night, or somewhere after hours. And if you call the numbers in DeKalb County for that after 5, nobody answers. So then this situation that we're dealing with in our local cities becomes a police problem and not a homelessness problem. And the police are really, while they want to help, they're not set up to do that. So finding some way to deal with homelessness after hours and in that situation seems to be a big issue for those of it. And contact between, if I'm riding a train and I see a problem of what appears to be a problem, a number to call 24 hours a day that I know is going to get some sort of response from would be invaluable, it would seem to me. It doesn't necessarily bring the police to the situation, bring some sort of help and assistance to these people. This is I'm delighted to see you all involved in this. I'm very envious of your ability to do this job because I'm not capable of doing it. And I know a lot of people that I deal with, they would not be able to do this at all. So I think it's an especially good opportunity to bring people together to try to come up with some sort of coordinated approach to dealing with this problem that involves a homeless person that's in the Decatur station, that if he gets out of that station, he's in Decatur. And how you coordinate that effort between the Decatur community, MARTA, and DeKalb County is part of figuring out how to do that, is part of the solution to being able to help these people. But the point I wanted to make, having forgot everything else that I've already said, is give credit to these people that walk out. Those 3 people that you have hired that walk out there on those trains, buses, and sit down next to those people and ask them to let us help, knowing that they're going to get rejected 60% of the time, are the real heroes in dealing with this effort. So thank you very much for what you're doing and being willing to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Floyd.
I think that comment is a great closeout to discussion, and I want to echo what Mr. Parker said, and that this seems like an infinitesimal amount of money compared to what we allocate annually, but it seems like this could be the biggest bang for the buck that we have in our mission. So with that, I'll call the question. Please vote your opinion on this resolution.
Mr. Chair, did you get a motion and a second?
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
I'll make a motion.
Imagine that. Yes.
I move for approval.
Is there a second?
Rod Frierson, second.
Now we can vote. That resolution passes, and I know that he's here to present for the next meeting, but I want to recognize Chairman Pitts, who just joined us. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 3, a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of facility-wide janitorial services, IFB B47309A, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Thomas, Manager of Building Maintenance.
Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. May I direct your attention to the agenda item number 3, the resolution authorizing award of contract IFB 47309A for janitorial services for facilities. Next slide, please. Again, my name is Richard Thomas. I am manager of building maintenance for the headquarters complex. Today, I will review objectives of this contract, the services to be performed, the procurement timeline, bid analysis, and recommended action. Next slide, please. The work will help us provide a safe and clean work environment. This will also support the goal of strengthening MARTA's brand. Next slide, please. Also provide janitorial services and floor care for many of MARTA's facilities. A list of these spaces will benefit from the services is on the slide. These spaces will shine as nicely as the police precinct pictured here in the photo. In addition, conference rooms, break rooms, loading docks, and disinfecting of high touch point surfaces is included in these services. Next slide, please. This contract will provide janitorial services to approximately 36 locations. 14 locations on the north and north lines are pictured here. Next slide, please. 10 facilities will be serviced on the south line, as shown here. Next slide, please. 4 locations will be serviced on the west line. Next slide. 8 services will be serviced on the east line. Next slide, please. You may remember Ms. Holland coming before you in previous meetings to discuss the cancellation of contract B47309 due to an issue related to the advertisement procedure that was not in compliance with the MARTA Act. The contract was re-advertised in May, bids received in early June, and I stand before you today to discuss the recommendation for the contract. The solicitation was advertised in the AJC, Georgia Procurement Registry, and on the authority's website. 82 firms received documents. 17 bids were received prior to the bid deadline. Next slide, please. The contract is a 2-year base with 3 one-year options. The DBE goal is 33%. The recommended vendor is a certified disadvantaged business enterprise, so the actual participation is 100%. I respectfully request to award contract B47309A to A Action Incorporated, the incumbent vendor, in the amount of $2,598,504.39. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Is there any discussion or questions of Mr. Thomas? I know that this topic has been thoroughly vetted due to coming back after the cancellation, after the advertising snafu, so I think there probably shouldn't be any questions, but are there? If there are none, is there a motion?
So moved. Bond.
Second?
Second, Blakely.
Ms. Blakely seconds. Please go ahead and vote. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I know you'll be staying at the podium because agenda item 4 is a resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration services for the MARTA headquarters complex, B46758. Mr. Thomas, go right ahead.
May I direct your attention to agenda item number 4, which is the resolution authorizing award of contract IFB 46758 for HVACR services for MARTA headquarters complex. Next slide, please. This contract will help us ensure continuous compliance with indoor air quality guidelines related to maintenance of HVACR equipment. HVACR stands for heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration. Next slide, please. During the presentation, I will provide an example of upgrades as part of a state of good repair efforts, scope of services in this contract, procurement timeline, and a summary of award analysis and recommendations to the committee. Next slide, please. MARTA has replaced HVACR equipment at more than 58 locations on the system. Some of the equipment, like the blue chiller pictured to the left, was installed at the time the building was constructed almost 30 years ago. This system lasted so long, exceeding its useful life expectancy as a result of a robust preventive maintenance program. The chiller was replaced by the unit on the right. We want to maintain these investments in a state of good repair so that we can continue to benefit from energy savings these newer units provide. That is where the services of this contract come into play. Next slide, please. The vendor will perform monthly or quarterly preventive maintenance services, repairs, upgrades to the headquarters, complex, annex, IOC, and Candler Park Data Center. This includes mechanical HVACR equipment, water treatment equipment, and building automation system devices. Next slide, please. The contract was advertised in April 16th. Bids were received in May. Bid opening in June, with evaluations of the bids occurring last month. Next slide. Notices were sent out to 7 vendors. The solicitation was advertised in the AJC, Georgia Procurement Registry, and the authority's website. 34 firms retrieved the documentations. 3 bids were received prior to the bid deadline. The bids were received by Johnson Controls, ARS, and Mallory and Evans. Next slide, please. The contract is a 2-year contract with a 2 one-year option with a DBE goal of 10%. The recommended vendor identified is DBE participant, which is Claude Paul Chemicals, who is a certified DBE, also the incumbent water treatment service provider. I respectfully request authorization to award IFB 46758 to Johnson Controls in the amount of $1,356,220. Thank you.
Any questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
Mr. Frierson moves. Do I hear a second? Mayor Floyd seconds. Please vote. The resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Moving on to agenda item 5, resolution authorizing the award of a contract for the procurement of ultra-low sulfur clear diesel and unleaded gasoline, IFB B47088. Mr. Taylor.
Well, good morning, Chairman Worthy, Mr. Parker, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. It is indeed a pleasure to see you all again. And for those I haven't met before, welcome to the team. May I direct your attention to the agenda item requesting a resolution authorizing award of a contract for the procurement of ultra-low sulfur clear diesel fuel and unleaded gasoline blended with 10% ethanol, contract number B47088. Next slide, please. This resolution, or the requested resolution, authorizes the GM, the CEO or his delegate to enter into a contract for procurement of diesel fuel and unleaded gasoline with Colonial Oil Industries. Most, if not all, may be familiar with this contract. We received approval from this committee earlier this calendar year in June. So today, most of this presentation will be a brief refresher until details are provided about the initial contractor selected and their bid withdrawal. Next slide, please. So the next 5 slides, I'll provide high-level details or summaries. This slide communicates the need for diesel and unleaded fuel for our revenue and non-revenue vehicles. Next slide, please. This slide tells the rest of the story, explaining the volume of fuel MARTA consumes. Next slide. Our previous fuel contractor was James Rivers Petroleum. After experiencing issues with James Rivers, we worked with legal services to terminate the contract. While in process of completing that, we added a supplemental fuel contract as a contingency plan to maintain continuity of service in case we had any lapse in fuel delivery. Additionally, I'd like to mention we're in the midst of updating our emergency refuel procedure, and we are negotiating with other fuel contractors in the event we have fuel delivery disruptions. We'll still receive fuel to continue service. Next slide. Now, Boswell Oil Company is MARTA's current diesel and unleaded fuel contractor. They have been very supportive providing fuel supplies for MARTA, especially during the fuel crisis that occurred in May of this year due to the cyber attack on Colonial Pipeline Oil Company. And by the way, they have no relations with Colonial, the contractor we're considering today for approval. Next slide, please. Again, we're pleased to say that this is a very competitive contract. This recurring contract received 8 bids, and the 15% DBE goal was achieved by using subcontractors to deliver fuel, which is consistent for a contract of this type. Next slide, please. Now, Gutman Oil Company was approved by the committee in June. They provided the highest discount rate for both line items for diesel and unleaded fuel. However, Gutzman withdrew their bids, and here are their core reasons why. First, The petroleum transportation fuel market is extremely dynamic. Supply and logistic deals that are attractive one day can quickly become unattractive or unavailable. They submitted their bids based upon indications on freight rates and supply costs. However, they don't have firm commitments on either because they didn't know if they would be awarded the business. And lastly, changes to the operations of petroleum product pipelines, including allocations on spur lines that serve the Atlanta metro area, are resulting in their supply sources no longer willing to honor the pricing indications they received prior to submitting their bid. And lastly, I'd like to say that Petroleum Traders was the next bidder with the highest fuel discount rates to be awarded line item 1, which is diesel fuel, until they informed MARTA that their bid was entered with an error. And after correcting their bids, their bid pricing was higher than their initial bid. As a matter of fact, when we calculated the pricing over 5 years between Gutman and Colonial Oil, Colonial was very close to our ICE, or our independent cost estimate. And that estimate, or their pricing, is at about $39,855,677 versus Gutman, who seemingly had a very low bid of $23 million when we did our estimate for that, $23,187,279. Next slide, please. So with that being said, Colonial Oil Industries provided the highest discounted rate for diesel fuel. Next slide. And they also provided the highest discounted rates for unleaded fuel. Next slide. At this time, I am requesting that the committee recommend to the full MARTA board this resolution authorizing the contract for procurement of ultra-low sulfur clear diesel fuel and unleaded gasoline blended with 10% ethanol, contract number B47088, in the amount of $40,809,726. Mr. Worthy, I respectfully return the matter to you and the committee for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any questions, comments, concerns? Mayor Floyd.
Turn that on, be better, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Is this a fixed price contract, or does it fluctuate with the price of fuel?
Yes, it'll fluctuate with the price of fuel. And how that happens is the daily opus rate when we receive invoices is calculated based on that. So it's all dependent upon fuel pricing when we get invoices.
Mr. Taylor, though, the discount rate is what's fixed in this contract, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
So the bid is a fixed discount rate off of the market price?
Off of a fluctuating level. Does the
Yeah.
price you're asking us, the $40 million, does that include some sort of buffer in there that if the price of fuel were to go up 25% tomorrow?
Yes, sir. What we did, we looked at our current fuel usage and cost, and we did an estimate based on that, and we added a couple of % of increase each year, hoping we would overcome the pricing. It's been very favorable for us this past contract because fuel pricing has been low, but prior to that, it was just exactly opposite. So it's a real touchy-feely game we play with the fuel cost, and we also hedge our fuel.
All right, and then would you mentioned it a minute ago, and I missed the Colonial people that you're recommending we award this to. Is that the same Colonial pipe tank people, or is it two entirely different organizations?
Two entirely different organizations.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Unfortunately named the same. Okay, any other questions? Do I hear a motion to approve this resolution? Floyd moves. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Snyder seconds. Please vote. Resolution passes. Moving on to the last item on the agenda item number 6 will be a bus transportation briefing. Ms. Vedette Locke, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Vice Chair Abdul Salam, Mr. Parker, Mr. McKinney, and Operations and Safety Committee members. As my colleague said, it is indeed my pleasure to present to you for the very first time. My name is Vedette Locke. I am the Director of Bus Transportation, and I will be presenting a brief overview of the bus transportation mode. Next slide, please. As you know, bus transportation, currently right now we service 113 routes, which is an increase from 113, or 110, shall I say, routes. We have 539 buses, and our FY22 budget is $122,192,000. Next slide, please. The leadership team is comprised of 4 general superintendents, which 3 of them manage the transit bus facilities, the 3 transit bus facilities, and 1 is over the bus control center in the IOC, and together we are at 96 years of bus transportation experience. Next slide, please. I'd like to touch on one of our proudest moments, which is our on-time performance goal, our KPI. As you see, we range for the last 7 months. Actually, it's much more than that at this time. We actually hit our goal in October, and we are still well above our goal. So we range between 83 and 84 percentile, and we've done that by rigorous tasks that we implemented about 1.5 years ago. With our off-the-lot performance, we do have some challenges, which we are working through that. We're working to reduce our absenteeism as well as increasing our resource availability. Next slide, please. So as you see with our customer service complaints, this is another one of our KPIs, and our greatest challenges right now are the pass-up complaints. So what we have done in transportation is launched a pass-up customer complaint campaign, and we also have a competition going with all 3 of the bus garages. Next slide, please. So part of this campaign, what we have done is change the way that our monthly safety meetings look. So as you see on the photos, what we have done is implemented display of pass-up videos with the operator's participation. We believe that if they see what's going on, they can interact, and which they have in high volume. Also, you'll see that police services, all the stakeholders, planning and scheduling, safety, the managers, the union, everybody participates in this monthly safety meeting. And there is a high volume of interaction. Next slide, please. Our accomplishments, of course, we aim to protect our on-time performance. So we're doing everything systematically to keep above that goal. We've also implemented a new bus bridge procedure on last year, which helped increase our response time when we launched those bus bridge protocols. We've implemented a de-escalation training program, which has increased the operator's awareness on how to de-escalate issues and situations that occurs out on the buses. We have also added 2 support staff members in the bus control center, which is a pivotal moment for us, being as though that bus transportation is 24/7, so that gives us much more boots on the ground in the bus control center. We've also implemented 3 compliance officers and 1 porter, so we are working on, what that role looks like. We've updated our standard operating procedures, so that's another proud moment. That was rigor, but we have successfully completed that. And another big deal for bus transportation is the community outreach, and the speed reduction plan, and that was triggered by an outcry from the Cascade community with buses speeding on Cascade. So bus transportation reached out to the community. We've partnered up with that community. We've invited them to the Perry Bus facility for a meet and greet and, communications with the operators, and that was a great turnout. There was even a video. And that also triggered a speed reduction plan for all 3 bus garages. So we are in that right now as we speak. Next slide, please. Projects and initiatives. So bus transportation is engaged in the bus network redesign, the electric buses. So there are probably about 4 buses here. I think there's 6 to be procured. We are also heavily involved in the Summerhill BRT services, the recruitment process. We are deep in that. We work closely with recruiting really on a weekly, bi-weekly, daily basis to increase those resources. We've implemented the mentorship program, and what that looks like is pairing up employees with individuals that's been around for a while that can help, encourage them to keep doing what they do every day. We've also developed an operator incentive program, so we are actually working on that right now, and that's going to be an extension from the Pass Up campaign that we have. And in that Pass Up campaign, one garage just announced, I think this morning, that they won for the month. So that's a big deal. The bus control center upgrade. So we are working on getting those Motorola systems upgraded for here at the HQ facility. And we've also enhanced the route familiarization for the new operators. So basically, when time and resources permits it, we will give operators additional time to get out and ride the routes. Next slide, please. Some challenges that we do face is operator retention and resource availability. And again, we are deeply partnered with recruitment. We also spread the word for employees that are here. If you got family and friends, we are working to communicate with other transit properties and a lot of things that we are doing to increase those resources. And again, the Motorola computer system upgrade for here at the HQ Center and the bus operators' new initiative training process. That is a challenge for us as we roll out top-down training for the operators. We do have, computers set up at the garages, but as you know, that population is huge. So we have asked for additional training tools when we get those types of training, like loop videos and things of that nature, to be able to get operators trained in bulk. And as you see, the biggest turnover is by way of resignations for various reasons. We talk to our operators every day. So that is probably the greatest concern. Next slide, please. And I will turn it over to you if you have any questions for me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Locke. It's nice to meet you in person finally.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question, just a couple of them. So one of the challenges you mentioned was this Motorola computer system upgrade. Is that something that we have already started to do, or it's just something that's in progress? I think we talked about it maybe 12 months ago concerning that.
Yes, I believe we've gone through a procurement and, are under contract in order to install the equipment, and now Vedette and her team are working with the radio consultant to help, execute the installation of the equipment.
Okay, great. And the next question, which will probably be covered in the KBIs, was, I guess if we get to that point, I'm going to just ask about the bus accident process by which we track those numbers. I know some things have happened on the system that impacted bus accidents, and I just want to know how that number pans out, so we'll get to it.
Yeah, we do have a combined effort between operations and safety really to look at accidents. I think it's worth noting, although, you know, an accident's still an accident.
Yeah.
The vast majority of our accidents are, you know, deemed to be non-preventable, you know, but we do need to institute, you know, additional measures just to reduce the overall, you know, impact of accidents to the system. So something that Ralph and I and Kali have been talking about, a few initiatives, and we'll be rolling those out to the board.
All right, thank you.
Chairwoman Scott.
Yes, Ms. Locke. Could you elaborate a little bit on the competition you mentioned?
Yes. The pass-up complaints, so what the managers are doing, again, as they view videos with the operators, they're getting their involvement in it. So on a monthly basis, we're looking just for that whole month who has the least amount of pass-up complaints. Doesn't matter if it's valid or invalid. And from that, we're going to do something special at that facility for the operators. That's one of the things that we're doing. And also, we want to incorporate, right now, we're just thinking through what other incentives can we do to advertise the operators. That's the biggest piece, is to advertise the operators so that they know that we care, which they do. We talk to them every day. And so we've rolled that out to them as well when we began this change in the monthly safety meetings. Yep.
So when you say you talk to them every day, are you referring to their immediate managers? Or?
Yes, yes. And I see them every day too, the general superintendents, you know, the dispatchers, you know, basically all the managerial team at the facilities. And we don't just wait until, you know, complaints or concerns come in. You know, we see them every day. And when we're meeting with them on other circumstances, we still get that nugget to them. So we talk to them about that and de-escalation. That's the top right now.
So you have a process in place to measure success?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Blakely.
I just wanted to ask a question about the last slide, the unfortunate trend in increasing resignations since January. Do you guys conduct is there an exit interview to maybe help nail down those areas that we could address to, you know, keep top talent? Yes, we as soon as we get a resignation, we bring them in. As a matter of fact, we talked to one yesterday, and it was just pure frustration, and she changed her mind, and what she stated is that she was upset. The numbers probably could be higher if we didn't talk to them the way that we do, but when we get them, oh yeah, absolutely. And it's not a MARTA thing. I just kind of want to be clear. You know, the operators are having a lot of things happening in their families. You do have a large amount of individuals relocating back to their home state to be with their families. You know, we do have some that are trying to adjust, their new CDL holders, they're trying to adjust to the lifestyle of a professional bus operator. It's 24/7, you know, adjusting to working on weekends and, you know, wide spreads of time during the day. You know, some going to other jobs with a smaller schedule. COVID has a big impact because of the school systems. It's just a wide range of what it is, so it's not one pointed reason. Yeah.
Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah. You know, I'd just like to thank Vedette for her leadership. I think if my recollection is correct, we met in 2005, and I think you were working in the radio room at the time. You've had you know, an impressive career and moved up, not brand new, but relatively recently into the director position. I think you know, we should be grateful that we have people like yourself who have worked, you know, progressively through the management ranks and worked in the you know, bus operator, and so really thankful to have yourself and members like that on your team who work for us, so thank you.
Thank you so much for that, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Locke.
Thank you.
I'll direct the committee to their packet. This is informational only. You have the FY21 June performance indicators for you to review at your leisure. And with no other business to come before operations and safety, I'll adjourn the meeting and turn it over to Chair Frierson for business management. Thank you.
In order? Okay. All right, would you please go ahead and sign in for the meeting? All right, the first item on the agenda is approval of the, okay, yeah, we're getting everybody. Okay. Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the July 29th, 2021 Business Management Committee meeting minutes. Can I get a,
Worthy moves.
okay, it's been moved. Second?
On seconds.
All right, can I get a vote for the minutes? Okay, the minutes have been approved. I'm going to let Mr. Jeffrey Parker speak a little bit to our next guest that we have that's here joining us at this meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. It's an honor to have Chairman Pitts here today. He's a personal friend, but also, more importantly, a friend of MARTA, leading our Fulton County. He is a real leader in the region, and wanted to come to talk about policies around investing our funds with minority-owned financial institutions, and share with us some things that Fulton County has already enacted. So Chairman Pitts, if you could address us, I would truly appreciate that.
All right, good morning, and thank you so much, Mr. Parker, and ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to speak with you briefly this morning, and I will be brief in my remarks. I know you have a full agenda, and one of the things that I've learned throughout my political career is that you can never be too brief. So with respect to the matter before you today, a couple of years ago, I spoke with our manager, Mr. Dick Anderson, about the need, and my desire rather, for us to invest some of our money with struggling minority financial institutions that were either domiciled in Fulton County or had branches in Fulton County. Well, fast forward to maybe 3 or 4 months ago, and I went back to him and really discovered that nothing had happened. So then I started looking around, and we're talking general fund money, first of all, but then we received the CARES money, and we also received a notice that we were going to receive $206 million in ARP money, American Rescue Plan money, and that's a lot of money that's coming in. A lot of entities are receiving that money. So here's a golden opportunity for us to do something unique. And the reason I say it's unique is because providing assistance to small and minority businesses is nothing new to Atlanta and Fulton County. Those of you who've been around for a while know that I was intimately involved in crafting the original minority and female business legislation when our distinguished Mayor Maynard Jackson was with us. And that has served as a model throughout the country and even the world, for that matter. So that's why I say there's nothing new to us. And evidence of that was the success that we had with our airport. And I often say to people, none of us at the time could have imagined, when we voted to do what we did at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, that airport, with minority and female participation, by the way, what that would have meant to, or what it means rather, to Atlanta, Fulton County, the state of Georgia, the United States of America, and even the world. It's still the biggest, the busiest, and the best. And although there may be one of those. Maybe we may have fallen behind a little bit, but we'll get there again. So the reason I wanted to come today is that when we got our allocation of the ARP money, I said to the manager, here's an opportunity for us, and to be consistent with the federal administration, President Biden's administration, that we need to really utilize some of this money and deposit it with firms, minority and female-owned firms that are domiciled or have branches in Fulton County. And the good news is the manager readily agreed. It was a unanimous vote by my colleagues. And what I want to say here is that when MARTA, when Mr. Parker heard what we were doing, and when Melissa Mullinax heard what we were doing, their first comment to me and the first telephone call that I received was, that is something that MARTA ought to do. And I was really thrilled and excited about that. I wanted this and still want this to be a national effort. In that light, we've been working, my office, when I say we've been working with Senators Ossoff and Warnock, Congresswoman Williams, Bishop, Johnson, Scott, and others, the Congressional Black Caucus, and even the national banking organizations to get them to understand the opportunity that we have here. Now, why is this important? It's important because these institutions are located within our communities. They look like us. They know the communities. No disrespect to the major financial institutions, but these are more likely to lend money to businesses that are in our communities for things like affordable housing, business investments. That's why this is so important. So again, ours was passed unanimously, and we're leading the nation in this effort. And for MARTA to join with us, I mean, I could not be more thrilled. I've spoken with the state of Georgia. They're looking at what they can do to help us, and the real beneficiaries are going to be these institutions. Now, when I limited it to Fulton County, that's our jurisdiction, we identified, I think there are 8 within Fulton County, but 2 so far have come forward. We put $5 million in one, a Unity National Bank, a black-owned bank, then $5 million in Royal National Bank, which is an Asian-owned bank, and we're trying to get the others to come forward as well. But anything that MARTA can do will be greatly appreciated by these institutions and will really be well received, not only by them, but their customers, not only existing customers, but future customers. It's the right thing to do. The timing is right, and I just could not be happier about what we've been able to accomplish so far with the $10 million that we've put forward, and to have an organization that means what MARTA means to this community. And by the way, your service area will be a lot broader than ours, which means then that your impact will be greater than ours. We just simply at Fulton County were the catalyst for this going forward. So I'd like to thank you in advance for your support of this effort. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Pitts, and you know, we've had a great dialogue with you around this, and subsequent to that, myself and Melissa and Raj and Liz have talked about this, and we really think it is something that we could participate in and ultimately benefit the residents, you know, through these minority-owned banks to really, you know, be able to allow them to invest in themselves. So we look forward to that. You know, I don't want to, we have the staff, and Liz does have a resolution that we'd like to offer to the board for their consideration, but with that, I would like to turn it back over to my chairman to see if there's any questions.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman Pitts, for being here. And once again, we think this is a great opportunity for us to be impactful in our community. So what we have before you is a resolution that's item 6 on the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I think Liz is going to read the resolution.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, go ahead. Appreciate it. Elizabeth O'Neill, okay.
Thank you, Chair Firestone, and good morning, board members. I do come before you this morning with a resolution encouraging the deposit of a portion of funds received by MARTA through various pandemic relief acts, as well as other MARTA funds, with minority-owned financial institutions that meet the authority's investment guidelines. And Chair Pitts has already, I think, very eloquently made the case for this resolution. And so the only thing I wanted to point out is that MARTA already has in place a program under the FTA guidelines that provides all of our vendors with a listing of the minority financial institutions in our jurisdiction and encourages them to utilize these institutions also. And so the resolution before you would just get your endorsement to officially encourage MARTA to also utilize these institutions for the deposit of certain financial funds. So I would respectfully request approval of the resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Okay, we have approval. Do we have a second? Okay, it's been seconded by Mr. Floyd. Discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I have a question.
Ma'am.
How specifically did you vet which minority banks the deposits were made?
I'm sorry, is that a question for Chairman Pitts?
Whomever vetted the banks.
Well,
Good
Fulton
morning,
County,
Chairman Pitts.
at Fulton County, we simply looked at those that were, as I said earlier, either domiciled, headquartered in Fulton County, or had branches in Fulton County. And by our count, there were 8. And so far, 2 have come forward to participate in the program. Others may not for different reasons, but there were 8 in our service area, just Fulton County. And then, of course, your service area is going to be a lot broader than ours and have a much greater impact.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments from the board? Okay.
Do we need to vote by hand since it's out of order?
Yes, we do. So all those who are opposed to this motion, raise your hand. Are there any abstentions to this motion? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Motion has carried. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very
Chairman.
much.
Thank you, Chairman
Pitts.
Pitts.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you, board members. The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the renewal of privacy and network security, cyber liability insurance coverage. Donna Jenkins, Director of Risk Management, you have the floor.
Good morning, Chairman Frierson, Mr. Durrett, Mr. Srinoff, Mr. Parker, and members of the board. As we've all seen lately in the news, ransomware attacks are causing huge disruptions for companies and organizations throughout the economy, with overseas hackers infiltrating systems and holding data hostage. Over the last 12 to 18 months, there have been several high-profile cyber breach and ransomware attacks, including SolarWinds, MS Exchange, and most recently Colonial Pipeline. All have had wide-ranging impacts, including damage to the reputation of the company and supply chain implications that cause a ripple effect in the economy. A direct result of the increase in the frequency and severity of cyber breaches and ransomware attacks is the disruption of the cyber insurance marketplace. Against that backdrop, I am in the unenviable position of being before you today to request authorization to renew the authority's network security and privacy, or cyber liability for short, insurance coverage for a 1-year period from September of 2021 to 22. Next slide, please. The purpose of my presentation is to provide the board with an understanding of the basics of cyber insurance coverage, to provide a high-level overview of the challenges driving the changes in the global cyber insurance marketplace, and to discuss my recommendations for the renewal policy. And at the conclusion of my presentation, I will ask for the committee's approval of the resolution. Next slide, please. Moving on to the basics of cyber insurance. First, let's discuss exactly what cyber liability insurance covers. The coverage is a bit unusual in that in the same policy it provides coverage for both first-party and third-party costs associated with a data breach or cyber attack. Most insurance policies typically provide either one or the other, not both types of coverage. First-party coverage helps cover expenses resulting from a cyber attack or a breach on the authority's networks. Examples of first-party costs that are covered by the policy include the following: communication with affected customers, providing credit monitoring services to customers, executing PR and reputation management campaigns, and other recovery activities. Third-party coverage is like general liability coverage in that it covers legal expenses that result from the authority being blamed for causing another firm's cyber loss. Third-party costs include liabilities that arise out of a potential breach, like regulatory defense costs, fines and penalties such as payment card industry fines, as well as network interruption costs and data restoration expenses. In summary, the policy provides a variety of methods for mitigating the ultimate cost of a cyber event to the authority. Next slide, please. So let's move on to an overview of the challenges driving changes in the global cyber insurance marketplace today. Since 2019, there has been a significant uptick in ransomware attacks, creating concerns industry-wide, and terms and conditions are being readjusted to account for this growing trend. The frequency and severity of other types of attacks are also increasing, and the increasing sophistication and morphing nature of cyber attacks are reshaping claim development patterns, causing insurers to reevaluate the rating models that they've used to set the prices that no longer accurately predict the cost of claims. Systemic losses are driving huge concerns with aggregation events like SolarWinds, where one piece of malware can affect thousands of organizations around the world, and supply chain risks like the Colonial Pipeline breach that affected the entire East Coast of the United States. The cyber insurance market has contracted dramatically in response to these losses and the systemic nature of cyber risk. Insurers are pulling back the amount of coverage they will extend to companies due to the increased volatility from large losses, and prices for the same coverage and limits in prior years are significantly higher and potentially unavailable to companies without adequate controls in place. Underwriters now require extensive new information, including responses to ransomware questionnaires. Minimum controls are required to even obtain a quote. If the authority did not have multi-factor authentication in place today, no insurance carrier would provide our broker with a quote. So in summary, premium costs are increasing dramatically and coverage availability is decreasing and even disappearing for many companies. Next slide, please. Finally, I'll discuss our strategy and my recommendations for the renewal of the 2021 policy. First, let's talk about our renewal strategy. As we watch the market conditions in this space continue to deteriorate over the last year, we knew that the 2020 renewal would be difficult. An important factor in our favor is that we have had cyber coverage in place since 2015, so we are not a new entrant to the market and have existing relationships with several underwriters. Because of the market conditions, we knew that we needed to start early. We held our strategy meeting with Marsh and MARTA's CISO team, which is Dean Malice's group, 120 days out from the current policy's expiration date. At this meeting, we explored options for changes in the structure of the coverage to control costs and to maintain our limits. The CISO team provided the broker with an overview of current controls and updates on items in progress. The Marsh cyber broker outlined the new information insurance carriers require to obtain quotes and provided the CISO team with the new ransomware questionnaire to complete for submission to the underwriters. And our brokers are, as we speak, out in the marketplace working to obtain quotes and finalize the program. Next slide, please. So let's discuss my recommendations for renewal of the policy. The current policy has limits of $20 million, a retention of $100,000, and an annual cost of $164,640, and we only had 2 insurance companies participating for those full limits. But due to the market conditions that we discussed previously, we have to restructure the program and the coverage with the goals of maintaining the limits of $20 million and minimizing the effect of a price increase. To accomplish these 2 goals, we need to increase the retention from $100,000, as this is no longer available in the market, to a minimum of $750,000 and possibly $1 million. We expect the cost of the renewal policy to be approximately $500,000, which is an increase of 204% over last year. Our goal as negotiations continue is to drive down the cost as much as possible within the constraints of the marketplace. Next slide, please. Moving on to wrap things up, in my presentation, Renewing the Authority's Cyber Liability Coverage, I focused on 3 key areas. First, we discussed the basics of what cyber liability insurance covers. Second, I provided a high-level overview of the challenges driving the global cyber insurance market. And third, we discussed my recommendations for restructuring the insurance coverage and the retention to maintain our limits of $20 million. Now I respectfully request the committee's approval of this resolution to renew the authority's cyber liability insurance coverage for a not-to-exceed cost of $500,000 for the policy period of September 15th, 2021 to 22. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jenkins. Can I get a motion?
So moved, Pond.
Okay, second.
Second, Worthy.
All right, and discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I've got a
Okay, Mr.
question.
Pond.
$500,000 for basically $750,000 to $1 million deduction of retention, correct? We pay the first $750,000?
Yes, sir, the retention would increase to $750,000 to potentially $1 million, but we're still working on that.
That seems like such a high number to get $1 million coverage. I would just...
No, the coverage would remain at $20 million.
No, I'm talking about the cost of the premium. I would challenge you to maybe consider increasing the retention or reduction, and I don't know how that would impact the cost, but you could have a claim every 2 years and pay for your, you would be awash on your policy if you're paying $500,000 a year with the deduction.
I guess I'm not understanding your question, I'm sorry.
I'm saying if you increase your retention.
We are talking about increasing the retention from $100,000, because that's not even, we can't even get that retention now in the marketplace, to either $750,000 or $1 million.
Well,
And then
maybe
the
I'm
coverage.
not making myself clear, but
Okay.
when I say I have for a $500,000 premium, I'm on the line for $1 million, and the insurance pays the rest of that.
Correct, up to $20 million, yes.
I would just suggest for that amount of premium, I'm just wondering if you increase the retention, would you be better served, that's all.
Well, we're looking at $1 million, and we'll just have to see what the savings is. But at this point, those are the retention levels we're looking at, is up to $1 million. And we could potentially look at increasing it above that. I don't know how much premium credit we get for doing that as far as, from a cost perspective, but we can certainly look at it.
Well, just for most businesses, they will look at that, so I would just suggest you go up and just see how it impacts the cost.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Floyd?
A couple of quick questions. How involved are these insurance companies in the procedures that we use to protect ourselves against cyber attack? I mean, how much do they pay attention to what our policies and procedures are?
A lot. We have to, when the CISO team, and I don't think Dean is in here, but when we have the renewal strategy meetings, they go through a number of things in the actual questionnaires that come from the insurance carriers to outline what our controls are and how they're implemented and what types of controls we have. So there's an entire, it's an extensive questionnaire, plus the new ransomware questionnaire that we obtain input from the CISO team and from the IT group to respond back to the insurance carriers, to show them, that we do have adequate controls in place. They also do run some scans on the websites and different things that we have out there, and they provide reports back to us, like the BitSite reports, that might emphasize different things that we need to be looking at as far as expired IP addresses and different types of things. So they get heavily involved in it now because of the significant risk that they are seeing that is systemic at this point in time. So they get
So if I'm
very
understanding you right, they do play a pretty active role in what we're doing, and they could, I guess, possibly say, well, you need to put this program in place now if you want us to continue this coverage kind of thing?
Ostensibly, yes. I mean, the multi-factor authentication is like the first level thing that they're using as sort of a cutoff for people. If you don't have that in place now, then the insurance carriers are not even giving you quotes at this point. So,
Last question is, have we done a risk analysis? I mean, have we done an analysis about what our exposure is? I mean, if we've got $20 million worth of coverage, is dollars or ask this question because I don't know how you put a dollar value on somebody doing something like this, but it seems to me there needs to be some sort of an analysis somewhere about what actually we are at risk with And even though we've got this insurance, is the risk higher than the amount of the coverage?
Correct. And we have done some analysis around that, and we can certainly get back to you with additional information in that regard. Right now, some of the coverage aspects are, whether you can obtain certain types of limits, and some of our constraints are that our broker is marketing us as a transportation entity, which is, what we are. However, we're also a public entity, and that has some challenges that go with it, with some of the losses that different public entities have sustained throughout the country, which can impact how much insurance we can actually even get.
Yeah, I think it would be, to me, I mean, you've got to keep it pretty simple, if I'm going to get involved and understand this, but it would seem to me that if we're carrying $20 million and maybe there's a consultant out there somewhere that could come in here and say, okay, your risk is $100 million, what our exposure is over that insurance limit, and also, I'd be interested in knowing what maybe some outside firm thinks about our risk, not just us, but somebody else, and I'm just asking those questions. Anyway, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. James, thank you for the presentation. That was helpful. I have a question about the policy itself in terms of exclusions under the policy. Are there things that we can do or fail to do that would cause us not to get coverage?
Just like any insurance policy, yes, there are exclusions in an insurance contract.
Could you give us an example of what things we have to avoid or make sure we do?
Well, at this point, I can certainly go back and look at it. Off the top of my head, I would rather look at it than just, throw out something. But that is also the subject of an audit that is going on at this point with Emil Zanov's group, that they are looking at the insurance policy itself and matching it with the controls that we have in place and ensuring that the controls we have in place are adequate and exist and would not void the insurance coverage. So that's already in process, and we're part of that group.
Okay, sure. No, that's what I wanted to check.
Okay.
Make sure we have the proper controls in place.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Any other comments from the board? I do recognize that this amount of increase is substantial, 203%. But however, looking at the market conditions and what's happening across the landscape, I don't know if you can ever have enough coverage. Because if something like that was to interfere with our operations, how do we recoup, $150 million worth of whatever we might be exposed to? So I think the point is that we want to make sure we have ample amount. And what the cost is what the cost is. I just wouldn't want to ever have to use it, but if we do, we want to make sure we're there. So, all right, any other comments? Yes, Mr. Floyd.
Question that,
yes.
This drives me to think that maybe the state government or the federal government ought to be involved in this somehow from a standpoint of limiting the liability of public corporations like this, and if there's not some sort of an approach that we should take with regard to, and I don't know about state legislation, but federal legislation regarding some sort of protection for public bodies like us about dealing with stuff like this. And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, we can talk to our government relations folks to start thinking about something like that.
Okay. Mr. Pound?
I'm just going to state the obvious. You can have all the insurance in the world, but the most important thing we could do is spend money on cybersecurity and protection.
Absolutely.
We've had all those
Yeah.
discussions. So.
Well stated. Okay, any other questions? Okay, if there's none, I call the question for the resolution. Would you please vote? All right, the resolution carries. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing modification in a contractual authorization for desktop equipment and deployment services, P 38567-A. Mr. Kirk Talbert, AGM Technology, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman Frierson, Mr. Parker, Mr. Srinath, members of the Business Management Committee. Good morning. Next slide, please. This is a request to modify our existing contract with Dell Incorporated to extend it for 1 year and to add funds in the amount of $550,000 from the approved capital budget for the purchase of PCs, laptop, and computer-related equipment. The request for this extension is primarily driven by delays in supply chains. It's difficult to get a hold of PC equipment, and it's stretched out our project timeline. We had hoped to have all the equipment in-house and purchased off of this contract to refresh older desktops and PCs, but due to supply chain, we're anticipating it will take us up to a year to complete this. So it's a request, as I said, for a 1-year extension of this contract with Dell, and the addition of $550,000 in capital funds to cover the additional equipment that has aged out in this delay. So with this, I respectfully request approval of this resolution for the extension of the contract.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Snyder. Okay. Question, discussions, anyone? No discussions from the board members? All right, I call the question. All right, can you please vote on the resolution? All right, the resolution is carried. Mr. Talbot, you have the next item on the agenda, item 4, a resolution authorizing a modification in the contractual authorization for Microsoft Premier Support Services, RFP P42625. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Again, Chairman, members of the committee. Next slide, please. This is a request to authorize the extension of a contract that we have now with Microsoft to extend it for 3 additional years. This contract currently supplies us with technical support and technical assistance for all of our Microsoft products that we have, which extends from everything to operating systems, email, Word, everything you may be familiar with, your desktop, and quite a number of technologies behind the scenes. This is a standard support contract which allows us to contact Microsoft anytime we run into technical issues, if we need fixes for whatnot. The request is for a 3-year extension, and the total amount is for $432,800. This will be coming out of the approved operating budget for technology. With this, I respectfully request approval of this contract extension.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I get a motion and a second?
Pond moves for approval.
Okay, and a second? Okay, Mr. Floyd, a second? Okay. All right, discussion by the board members? Hearing none, can we vote on the resolution? Resolution has carried. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. And the next item is yours also, a resolution authorizing the modification to a contractual authorization for the maintenance and agreement for the Palo Alto firewalls, RFP P46995. Mr. Talbot, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman, members of the board. Thank you very much on the slides. This is a request to modify our contract for maintenance and support on our firewall systems. We have over 14 firewalls that protect the agency from the exact type of issues that we just discussed through cybersecurity, keeping the bad people out. This is a request for a 1-year extension of the contract at the same pricing that we had for this past year. Our current contract is expiring here at the end of September. This will add $370,701.52 to that contract coming out of approved operational funds. With this, I respectfully request approval of this resolution to extend this contract.
Thank you very much. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve.
Okay, Mr. Snyder, second?
Second.
Okay, second by Mrs. Stacy. Okay, any discussion?
Chairman, I have a quick question, just to segue on the cybersecurity insurance discussion. Is this updating of this firewall issue, has it been vetted by the insurance carrier? And is that going to be sufficient under their requirements for the cybersecurity piece?
So I'm not qualified to say whether the potential insurer that's selected would approve of this, but I can say that the current firewall configuration that we have now is what we submitted to the market. It's a very standard configuration in the sense that it's industry standard, it's best practice for firewalls. So what we're continuing to do with this is continuing to utilize that and continuing to keep it up to date, if that makes sense. I can't speak on behalf of insurers, but back to your earlier question about the types of things that would disqualify you for insurance.
Right.
I can't imagine an insurer supplying insurance if you did not have firewalls. In this day and age, this is considered one of those prerequisites for any kind of security.
No, I 100% agree. I just, the scale of the firewall seems like we are improving it. And so I'm just trying to make sure that this level of firewall is sufficient.
So I would be remiss if I ever said anything was ever sufficient, right? It's a forever escalating game. This represents our latest deployments of firewalls, and we're continuing to support and maintain these. These are relatively new equipment and state-of-the-art. Behind the scenes, we're forever tuning the firewalls to make sure that we keep blocking the bad stuff and allowing the good stuff through, right? So it's a forever progressive process of doing that. But this represents state-of-the-art for firewalls. I guess that's the easiest way to answer the question.
Yep, I understand. Thank you. That's the answer.
Any other discussion? Comments? Okay, I'll call the question. Please vote. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is a briefing for the FY 2021 year-end financial highlights. Raj, Chief Financial Officer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Frierson. Good morning, everyone, members of the Business Management Committee, and good morning, Mr. Parker. Before I discuss the fiscal year 21 revenue and expense numbers, I want to note that these are preliminary numbers, as you see on the screen, which means the audit, which has just begun earlier this week, is not complete, will be complete sometime in October, and the numbers may change. However, these are the best numbers we have at the present time. Next slide, please. Overall, the results have been very good for the year. Revenues were about $25 million higher than we budgeted, and the expenses were also trending in the right direction, which means they were lower by about $47 million compared to the budget. So overall, the net revenues of $650 million and the expenses were $510, resulting in a surplus of about $139 million for fiscal year 21, which is very good news. Next slide, please. A little bit more granularity on that. There were three components which contributed to the increase in revenues. These were the same I've discussed in the prior months, which is number one being the CARES Act fund, or the stimulus fund we got from the federal government. So that certainly helped us. And that was one of the biggest contributors for the positive variance in revenue, followed by sales and ad valorem taxes. Both were considerably higher, roughly about $30 million higher than we had budgeted. And last but not the least, we also received about roughly $7 million of credit from prior years, which were recorded in fiscal year 21. That helped increase our revenues for the fiscal year. The only black cloud, if you will, on the revenues horizon was the passenger revenues. They were considerably lower than what was budgeted for all of the obvious reasons. I don't think I need to explain that. So that was that. And on the expense, again, the biggest contributor for the positive variance were the vacancies. We had roughly about 437 vacancies at the end of fiscal year 21. And the cost savings associated with the wages, the overtime, and the associated benefits contributed significantly towards a positive variance. The second contributing factor was the contracted services, which is predominantly paratransit service, where we offered less trips than we had budgeted, again, commensurate with the lower ridership we had in bus and rail. Next slide, please. This is for the month of June, and the month of June again followed the previous 11 months. Overall, we had a surplus of about $15 million for the month of June, which contributed to having $139 million for the fiscal year. Again, many of the reasons were the same. There were a few differences, which I will address on the next slide. If you can move to the next slide. On the revenue side, not much change from what we had seen in the prior 11 months. It was predominantly the CARES Act and the sales tax and the ad valorem taxes that contributed to the positive variance. On the expense side, for the month of June, however, this was the last fiscal month of the year. So we were pretty rigorous in making sure all of the expenses that we had not recorded or accrued for the fiscal year did get accrued, because we want to record expenses in the right fiscal year. So that resulted in about $3.5 million higher than budgeted accruals for medical expenses. Those were largely because we had a couple of pretty big claims, as well as on the contractual services. This was predominantly information technology. We went through, scrubbed the books, and realized we had not accrued some of the expenses, so we made sure those were recorded in the right fiscal year. And last but not the least, that there were a slight increase in claims, expenses, or reserves, resulting from two pretty large pending cases or settlements. So that, in a nutshell, concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
May I just point out one thing and thank a variety of members of the team on the year-to-date numbers, although it's also on the June numbers. We are below budget in overtime, and I think this is I'm looking at Kevin, I think this is the first year in a long, long time that we've achieved that. A lot of folks worked hard to do that. Raj and Kevin clearly, Scott in the back, Luz and Kali really focused on curtailing overtime spending, make sure we were budgeting things, and so hats off to a lot of hard work for people to meet that important metric.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Raj. Yes, it's good to see some of these trends go favorable, but it's in a difficult business environment, and we're being faced with these challenges just like all these other transit institutions are. So it's good that we're healthy and that we've done some things to make sure that we remain healthy. This is a briefing. Are there any other questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Floyd.
Quick question. On page 3, out of curiosity, under other revenues, actual was 16.1, budgeted was 9.2. Just as an example, what would include or would be shown under other revenues?
Yeah, thank you. The positive variance was predominantly because of some of the credits, natural gas revenues, credit we received from the prior years. That was one. And also some of the real estate income, advertising income, all of this will fall under other revenues.
Right, I saw the lease income, and so I didn't know if it was part of the other or
It is.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Floyd.
Real quick question. It looks like sales tax receipts are strong for the year, and I'm expecting that to continue. Is there any reason to think that that's not going to continue to be above budgeted items?
That's an excellent question. It's a two-part response to that. One, the forecast revenue, sales tax forecast we received from the Georgia State University is pretty robust, and they do anticipate an increase of about 3.1% in fiscal year 22 compared to 21, followed by actually twice that number, well over 7% in fiscal year 23. I can tell you July, we received the sales tax, actual sales tax revenues for July. They were a lot higher than what we had budgeted, so hopefully that will continue into the fiscal year.
Raj, I might be remembering it wrong, but I think the July numbers were higher than the July in a pre-COVID number. I think
that is absolutely correct. Overall, for July as well as for fiscal year 21, we exceeded the numbers, sales tax revenue numbers, pre-COVID. That's for 2019. Whatever sales tax revenues we received, those were exceeded in fiscal year 21. as well as in July compared to July of 21. I'm sorry, July of 19.
Okay, I think a lot of that, at least in my mind, those sales tax revenues is that change in the state law where we're allowed to get tax from Amazon and people purchases over that kind of stuff. I think that has, at least that's what I
Absolutely.
think. I don't have any reason for doing that, but, and the other thing is, I'm not sure I understand why the budgeted amount for the CARES Act withdrawal number went up. I'm not sure I understand what you're basing that on and why that would be more than what we budgeted for that, unless it's based on something other than that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not very intuitively clear. Our budget was based on what was estimated to be eligible expenses we could draw down in fiscal year 21, and that what we actually drew down exceeded that. In other words, the overall amount we received from CARES Act, that's a fixed amount, $295 million. We expected to recognize a portion of that in fiscal year 21 and another portion in fiscal year 22. But since we had more eligible expenses in 21, we were able to draw it down faster in 21, which means we will see a little bit less revenues in fiscal year 22.
All right. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Raj? All right. Okay. Any other comments from the board? Okay. All right. Hearing none, that's the last item on the agenda. I call this meeting to adjourn. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.